There is a lot of disrespect when it comes to Michigan football entering 2025. I'm going to share why the Wolverines deserve your respect and why it could absolutely be a surprise team. We're going to do that right here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. I want to give a big thank you to all of our everydayers, and thank you for making us your first listen. Super excited to get into what we've got today. Just kind of perusing some of those, the things that you see online, right? Like, which there's always just a bunch of stuff. Some disrespect for Sherrone Moore, that in particular, that I think needs to be called out, rooted out, just cut off at the stem. And then we're going to get a little bit into what might make this defense particularly special. And then beyond that, we didn't really get into the schedule that just got released, which is 6 games with the times being announced. That's half the season. We'll get into that in segment 3. But we're going to go ahead and start by talking about Athlon Sports and their Big Ten coaching rankings, which I saw this morning. I think it came out a couple days ago. To me, it was kind of shocking. And I understand, like when you look at some of the people who have longer resumes, you say, okay, well, I can't really drop them down, right? Like, oh, that person did this and this and this. I can't really change this and that, right? But Sherrone Moore, I would have thought would have been like around like 6, 7, 8, whatever, coming out of year one, maybe a little higher, potentially a little lower. But what I saw kind of surprised me because Athlon Sports and their Big Ten coaches rankings had Sherrone Moore at number 15 in the country. I think that is absurd. Now, we talked a little bit about CBS Sports having Sherrone Moore at like 58 in the country, which I thought that was disrespectful. I didn't count to see where he stood in the Big Ten, but I at least would assume that was kind of middling in the Big Ten, right? Like that's still the upper, not quite upper third of all college football, but it's somewhere above the mean as far as where he stands. Whereas Athlon's just taking a look at Sherrone and saying, like, you know what, he's no good. Can't have him out there. He's a bad coach. Now, they're not exactly saying that. They're like, oh, there's promise. You can see the recruiting, and that's looking really good. And there's other aspects to it that makes them say, like, all right, yeah, this might work out, right? Obviously, the 2 games at the end of the season. So he's only ahead of Mike Locksley at Maryland. I'm trying to remember I know the very dead last one was Deshaun Foster at UCLA. David Braun was the only other one. And I think that's unfair. I'm going to give you a couple reasons why. Number one, he has a track record. It's short, and I understand the part of that track record has 5 losses, 3 of whom came to college football playoff teams. One ended up being a 10-win Illinois team. Only 1 loss came to a team that ended up with a losing record, and that was Washington, who ended up at 6-7, and ended up being undefeated at Husky Stadium last year, by the way. So they were impossible to stop at home, but really bad on the road, which maybe that's a lot of the East Coast travel and all of that. But I think when you look at what the record is, you kind of have to go back, right? Because he's got the 4 games in 2023. And the fact that he learned like an hour before, maybe 2 hours before kickoff at Penn State that Jim Harbaugh would not be coaching. He would be the head coach. I'm sure there was some mental preparation for that, but still, I mean, like that, there's that. And then JJ McCarthy, can't be protected in that game and gets hurt. So that it's having to kind of suddenly pivot and change up your tactics and just be like, we're just going to keep running the ball. We're just going to keep doing it. We're just going to lean on our defense and keep running the football, and ends up not only emerging from that game, but also beats Ohio State 30-24. I think a lot of people forget that it was Sherrone. Now, from a national perspective, you're a Michigan fan. I don't think you forgot that. But I think a lot of people forgot that it was Sherrone that coached in that game. And then, yeah, he lost to Texas, which made it to the semifinals of the college football playoff. He lost to Oregon, which made it to the quarterfinals, and lost to the team it already had beaten in Ohio State. And lost to Indiana, which lost right away. Like, just immediately. Just went in there and just right away. Sound like the Gospel of Mark. And immediately. You have those. You have the two bad losses. But, I mean, he had the best win in all of college football last year in Ohio State. And he had, arguably a couple of the best wins, two of the best wins in 2023 as an acting head coach. And then you add in the recruiting and all of that, and it's like, you're going to tell me that if you're telling me with a straight face that you're going to look around college football and say, like, I would rather have Greg Schiano at this point. Now, here's the thing. Greg Schiano has built programs. Jed Fish, who's ahead of him, had, rebuilt Arizona. And that's kind of where you see a lot of this, right? Is like, well, some of these guys did this and this and this and this. I don't think that means that he needs to be down at the bottom. Ryan Day is obviously number one on this list, just came off winning a national championship. Inherited a team he didn't have to really rebuild, but did still change things up enough to recognize, like, hey, we need to do things, right? But it's a different scenario. If you want to look and say, well, Sherrone inherited this situation, I think that his situation that he inherited was in a much worse scenario than, like, Ryan Day taking over Ohio State in 2019, because obviously he had a lot of time to prepare. Sherrone didn't necessarily, and he had to fight with Jim Harbaugh for staff members, pretty much into the spring. And then still had to deal with some other things like Greg Scruggs with his, DUI. And then, okay, now we got to get a new defensive line coach. We got to make some tough decisions. And he's doing these things while every other team is completely set. So, like, I know a lot of people say, well, roster management last year. It's like, listen, he didn't really even have a chance to kind of set that roster. Right there. They had some opportunities for some quarterbacks and things of that nature. I had heard from like a third or, let's see. Essentially, I'm the fourth hand on this. But those things happened with Jim Harbaugh at the helm, and Jim apparently just kind of nixed it. So, like, he's just kind of behind the eight ball. So, and then yet he still keeps the team together enough to where they beat Ohio State and Alabama to end the season. I mean, he's got 4 of the best wins in the last 2 years of all of college football. To me, that should earn some cachet. Being able to flip Bryce Underwood, even if that's an NIL play, all of that, to me, that should be worth something. But not to Athlon Sports. I know this is not terribly dissimilar from the CBS thing, but to me, this was even more disrespectful. But you know what isn't disrespectful? The Michigan defense. It is disrespectful to opposing offenses, but I mean, certainly, I don't think they're getting much disrespect from a national perspective. Maybe some. We're going to talk a little bit about the defensive outlook overall, because there are some thoughts out there. And we're going to get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, the NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there has never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy for you to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And guess what? I almost played so smart. I gave you a parlay that I ended up playing yesterday. And if it wasn't for Tyrese Halliburton forgetting how to score the basketball, well, he hasn't scored as little as 8 points in like forever. Now I had him at over 25. That's a pretty high number for him. Missed out on that, but everywhere else. Karl Anthony Towns, 10 plus rebounds, check. Jalen Brunson, 30 plus points, check. Knicks win, check. So close. Maybe you could play smarter than I am when you're paying close attention to the trends, the things that you can do with FanDuel. And you know what? If you are a first-time player, you can get $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet if that wins. So now's the perfect time to go and sign up over at FanDuel. Head to FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet. As I said, if it wins, you'll win $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. The setup is almost complete of the room here. Very excited about it. You can't see Zuri. She is here. She's a little nervous to get up with the low profile mic that isn't blocking my face in any of the 3 shots, which I'm very excited about. But we got her a little doggy bed. She already had one, but this one's just ultra plush, and she is right there. Let's see. We can do the alternate angle with my phone. We're just gonna. That's how we're gonna. So we do have a Zuri. There she is. we're going multiple doing. It sounds like Arrested Development. We're having multiples on this. Okay, no, Zuri, go lay down. Nope, go lay down. Lay down in your puppy bed. All right. She likes her puppy bed, but room's almost done. Excited about it because you know it has been a studio since I moved in. It was either basically work on the computer and do a podcast or walk or run on the treadmill, and that was it. So the fact that like this is becoming like a livable room, multi-purpose and stuff is just kind of exciting, right? All right. This is kind of going back a little ways, but I'm covering kind of what I wrote today. We saw that, or I saw the royal we, that PFF listed 10 of the top returning defensive ends in college football. And unsurprising to me, Derrick Moore is number 10. And it's kind of funny. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up today is because I was just on, I guess it probably aired today, with Spencer, who does Locked On Ducks, but he also has his own Locked On College Football show here on the network as well, if you haven't checked that out. So I appeared on that, and you know, this is kind of like one of the things. I was talking to Mike Fitzpatrick on the Michigan Man podcast. I don't know if that's out yet or not today, but like I was talking to him yesterday, and you know, he brought up the same thing, and it just feels like everyone wants to, when they talk about the Michigan defense, they say like, well, there's no Mason Graham, there's no Kenneth Grant, there's no Josiah Stewart, there's no Will Johnson. Real ones know you'd actually have to go into like, well, there's no Amir Hall, there's no Quentin Johnson, right? Like, but you know, Makari Page, come on, people, more than that. But you know, we're not, you know, I kind of got that exact thing, that same like, well, don't you think that, you know, you lose that talent? And he was right to point out the one game, right? Like that. He's like, you're counting on one game. I'm like, yeah, but it was against a really good, like the number 22 scoring offense in the country. He's like, well, Oklahoma held them to 3. I'm like, okay, that's fair. One game and it's that. But I think it's the trajectory of things. Michigan also, I mean, yeah, they had 3 of the 4 players that we're talking about that are gone in the Ohio State game and held them to 10. So do I feel good about it? Yes. But then you add in the Derrick Moore, like Wink Martindale said in the pre-spring press conference, like, I'm not sure that we have any first day guys, but we got probably a lot of day 2 guys when it comes to the NFL draft. I tend to agree. But I think that there's a couple players, and Derrick Moore is one of them, that I think could play his way into the first round. I have more. I think the 2 linebackers are getting slept on massively. I absolutely could see Ernest Hausman and Rayshaun Barham both being first round type of NFL guys. Because number one, they've got the size you can't teach. You can't like, and it's like NFL size. They've got speed, they've got instincts, and some of those instincts had served them wrong early in the season, but it got better as the year went on. So there is a lot that I really like about the front. But, and that's not even mentioning like Rayshaun Benny being listed as the number 2 returning defensive tackle also by PFF. Like, okay, they've got the number 10 returning edge out of 136 teams in college football. They got the number 2 returning defensive tackle out of 136 teams in college football. There's other guys that are going to improve because you always see that, right? Like you see guys get better year over year, or especially with the change of scenery. I would not be surprised to see Trey Williams or Damon Payne be one of those guys, or like a 3rd-year Eno Etta, 3rd-year Trey Pierce, a senior TJ guy who I feel like people are sleeping on. I mean, there's a reason why internally they feel like this is maybe the best front 7 in the country. I have a hard time imagining other teams looking at Michigan's front 7 and being like, yeah, we're going to see so many better. Now, could it fall off a cliff? It absolutely could as well. But Michigan starts with its front 7. Now, you do need the cornerback play, and that is one of the things that we've talked about multiple times. I still feel like right now you have 3 that you can count on, and probably a 4th in Shamari Earls. But do I want to throw Shamari Earls to the fire against Oklahoma or Nebraska? Probably not. right? Like he's going to see better receivers. I mean, no offense to Michigan's receivers. Like there's other schools at this juncture that have more tested receivers at least. Maybe not more talented, but more tested receivers. So I would like to see Shamari come into his own down the line. And probably the same with Josiah Edmonds. So there's like very little room for error. But then you start adding in some of the unknowns, like the Metcalf brothers, TJ and Tevis, who I just think are like, I feel like everybody's sleeping on them. Michigan feels, especially with Tevis. I mean, TJ, like I think is going to be more of the starting player, but I think Michigan has this feeling like we hit the jackpot with this. Like, does no one know? It's kind of like when you look back to the transfer portal going into the 2023 season, or even with like Rayshaun Barham, where it's like, you know, when they, or even the year before, like getting Olu, or like getting a guy like Drake Nugent or AJ Barner. You know, I feel like Michigan, is just kind of sitting there quietly being like, did we just kind of hit the jackpot and not get really any fanfare for this? Okay, cool. That's kind of how I feel like Michigan is with the Metcalf brothers. So for as much as there's like a disrespect for Sherrone Moore that we talked about in segment 1, I also feel like there is more respect for the Michigan defense. More people feel like, yeah, it's probably going to be pretty good. But then again, like I saw like some what is it, like the Big Ten huddle had like a couple of their guys. They're based out of Bloomington, but I don't know who those guys are fans of or whatever. Could be Indiana, could be someone else. Having like Wink at like number 5, one of them, like one of them had him at 4 and the other one had him at 5. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. But okay. All right, fine. You know, like whatever. I think that's absurd. Like the guy who was being spoken of, and I understand last season did not start great. The guy who was being spoken of as the best defensive coordinator in the NFL just a couple short years ago. I mean, we're talking 2021 season, but still, like thought of as the best defensive coordinator in the NFL now is like the 5th best in the Big Ten. Yeah, of course. Let's go. Let's do this. But I think though there's a lot of reasons why Michigan is going to prove a lot of these people wrong. Offensively is just as big of a question mark to me, right? As the confidence I have in the defense, offense continues to be a question mark, but it's a different style of question mark because it's like nowhere to go but up, and you got some talent there that you've never had before in Bryce Underwood, and I think having guys like Donovan McCulley and Justice Haynes and Jordan Marshall and Hogan Hansen, it's going to pay some dividends. But I'm still leery until I see it. Is kind of where I am with the offense. All right, we've got plenty more coming up. We got to talk about this schedule release. Michigan starting off with 2 night games. We're going to go through the 6 that have been announced. We're going to do that here in just a moment. All right, I got to knock on wood here. Because at this juncture, at this moment, we've had no issues. Now I could with the new setup and all that, I could sit down and edit it and come up with all kinds of issues. That's certainly it's on the table. Hopefully not in the cards, but it is on the table. So far, the computer and the monitor have stayed connected, so the recording hasn't stopped. The jib hasn't aired out. We're going the right speeds everywhere. Everything I believe is in focus. We might have a little bit of a banger here, folks. We might. I don't know. Could all fall apart right now. But you know what? We made it 19 minutes. So if that's the case, I'm fine. Right? If like the last 5 minutes of the show fall apart, then so be it. All right. Let's go through these last the 6 games that have been announced. One is a tentative, but let's start with the Ohio State game because it's noon, Fox, whatever. Like that's the expectation. There's no, like, if it was anything different, like it would be like, boo. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe some of you want a night game at the Big House against, actually, that would be kind of cool. I would not be down for it considering I'm already cold on the field in the day against Ohio State. It would be interesting to have one night game. Maybe that's the playoff. Maybe it's the Big Ten championship game. Who knows? Still, all right. I think it's that game's whatever. Starting off with the 2 night games, you got New Mexico starting off in week 1 at the Big House. I'm fine with that, right? Like I think that's completely fine. Because as we talked about in the mailbag, season opener to me, like that's okay. New Mexico is not exactly an exciting opponent, but fans will be excited because this is the first taste of Michigan football that they'll have had since December 31st. First time in the Big House since November 23rd. So, it's been at that point 9 months, 8 months or whatever. So people are just going to be ready to go. 10 months. I can't do math on the fly. Yes, I went to the University of Michigan. No, I did not go for math. Anyway, so I think I think that game is fine being there. I'm going to credit Steve Dace because he had mentioned Oklahoma being a night game to me back in like January. And I hadn't even really considered it. I was just thinking I'm still kind of have Oklahoma in the Big 12 in my mind. I'm like, well, yeah, Big 10, Big 12, that's going to be noon on Fox. But no, they aren't no longer in that agreement, in the media rights deal. They're ESPN. So therefore it's on ABC. That feels like it's probably a college game day scenario, right? Especially because week 1 has a lot of the big games and this is the big game of week 2. Listen, does it put Michigan at a disadvantage to some degree? Absolutely. Norman, I would have loved to have gone to honestly, I wanted to go to Norman at noon because when I think of those Big 12 schools, I think about being there in the day, that type of thing, right? Because they play night games, but I think of them more as daytime. Maybe I've just been conditioned to believe that SEC is more of the nighttime schools, right? I feel like I have been propagandized into that. But that's big environment, fine. Okay, that's cool. I think all the flights are really relatively early the next day, so that's interesting. But okay, yeah, I'm fine with that. It's you know what? If Michigan goes and earns that win, Bryce Underwood goes and earns that win, no one is going to be saying, Michigan, whoever wins that game is going to be, especially if it's Michigan, is going to be the hype beast. Consider Oklahoma and Michigan being this year's Michigan Notre Dame. Because winning against the other doesn't necessarily mean anything, unfortunately. But whoever wins the game is going to be unfairly hyped, and whoever loses is going to be unfairly soured upon. But it might not be anything. We'll see. You got noon BTN with Central Michigan. Fine. No Sherrone Moore against his former team there. That's just going to be whatever. I think that's a fair place for that. The following week, 3:30 Nebraska on CBS. I believe that was the case even with CBS. I believe it was a 3:30 kick against Nebraska at Nebraska in 2023 as well. I'm pretty sure. And I think it was CBS's B team that ended up being on it, not... do I have that right? Were they on CBS that year? That might have been might have been the next year. It was last year, the first year, or was it 2 years ago? I don't know because I'm not watching these games on TV, but I think... No, because we've talked to CBS 2 straight years, I think, at Big Ten Media Days. So, yeah, okay. I'm pretty sure that was CBS's B team. Brock Heward and someone else. And I think it was maybe it wasn't Brock Heward, but I think that was a Tim Brando game. Maybe it was Fox's. That was it. It was Fox's B team. That's what it was. I think that that's fine. Definitely better than at night. 2:30 time local kick. I think that's a fine place to go and do that. Would I have rather it have been at noon? Probably, but it's still it'll be a little bit heightened. But actually, at that point, without Sherrone Moore, maybe I don't want that as heightened. That's kind of how I'm at. Maybe I don't really want that game as heightened. Then you got Wisconsin, which is either noon or 3:30. I'm hoping that one's a noon kick because that just feels like. I don't know that. I mean, it could be big noon, right? If Wisconsin ends up being pretty good, I don't think they will be. They play Alabama earlier this year. They just don't seem like but Wisconsin's got just a brutal schedule. I have a hard time seeing them emerging from this. Luke Fickell's going to have an awful time this year, barring just really turning things around. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's 3:30. That feels like it's more that feels like it's probably more like noon BTN ultimately. And that's it. That's what they've announced. So, so far so good. I think the rest, when you look at like Purdue, Northwestern, Maryland, I kind of feel like Michigan State, most of the rest of it is, you might as well put it like, I don't know, 4:30 on Tubi, something like that. Freebie? Could you have it on Freebie? You know, I was going to say Disney Plus, but technically I guess week 2 will be on Disney Plus at this point, but yeah, you know, I don't know. Have it on something different. Have it live on X. Those 4 games. And then there's 2 others. I don't even remember what they are at the moment. But anyway. All right, that's our Friday show. A little bit later since we're getting kind of some of this stuff all organized continuously and getting the puppy bed, which you are able to see. Anyway, that's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again next week, probably with some SMSB updates from Sherrone Moore. Lots to get into as recruiting, the official visits start in earnest, so there's a ton. So anyway, thank you again to our everydayers. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.